Today, we're going to talk about the organization that both Justin and I work for. It's called Downtown Streets Team. We'll talk a little bit about the work that we do. We actually work in a lot of the same cities that Looker does, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And mostly today talk about our journey with data, where we've been, where we are, where we'd like to go, and that's where Justin will chime in. So for me, my name is Chris Richardson. I'm the Chief Program Officer for Downtown Streets Team. I was hired as the second employee way back in 2009, and in fact, this month I celebrate 10 years with Downtown Streets Team. My job is to oversee all 15 of our locations, make sure that the model is operating correctly, and develop all new business. So I'm quite close to this issue. Now, you don't have to walk too far here in San Francisco, especially right next to Market Street here, to see the impacts of homelessness and the growing crisis that is homelessness here. In fact, we have a team that operates, and I'll tell you more about what a team is in a few slides here, but we have a team that operates right down here at Civic Center, where you have people that are living on the street. Here in California, we have about 150,000 people that are homeless at any given time. That's probably a huge undercount. I'm not here today to talk about that process and how bad that data is, but trust me, it's terrible. And what we know for sure is that 100,000 of those 150,000 people are going to be unsheltered. So they're sleeping on our streets tonight. That's just in the state of California. This is a national issue, especially prevalent here on the West Coast. Another thing that folks don't realize about this issue is the impacts of homelessness, not just on the people experiencing homelessness, but on all of us, even in this room, on our quality of life, but also even on our wallet. One of the most surprising things for folks that aren't very well connected to the issue of homelessness, it's actually more expensive to keep people outside than it is to just house them. And so the impacts of homelessness we see in our communities, whether it's at City Hall, through our county, and I'll talk about that a little bit more as well. Some of the most devastating is on our environment. So we've worked along creeks, especially one in San Jose, right next to Silicon Valley, and you have 500 folks that are living in this creek encampment that have no access to water, so they use the creek. They have no access to toilets, so they use the creek. They have no access to garbage, so they use the creek. It's pretty horrifying, some of the things we pull out of there. Certainly on our public health and hospital system, our police and criminal justice system, our police are acting, they're spending sometimes upwards of 75% of their time arresting the same people that are criminalized for being homeless. And then certainly on our taxpayers, the impacts of homelessness, it's growing, and it's pretty severe. So I mentioned counties. Our headquarters is in Santa Clara County, or Silicon Valley, for those that are less familiar. Santa Clara County actually did the first ever cost study of homelessness of its kind way back in 2015, and they discovered that the county alone, not the cities, not the nonprofit world, just the county was spending over $500 million a year on unhoused men and women. This is in just the health and hospital system that they run themselves, again, criminal justice system, and the smallest sliver of that pie is the services that they're providing themselves. Hopefully, by now you're getting the picture that this is a pretty catastrophic crisis. And if you don't believe me, again, just walk down Market Street. We launched Downtown Streets Team in 2005, and one of the very first things we did was a survey of unhoused men and women in downtown Palo Alto, where we started. And the survey was designed by two people that had never experienced homelessness. And so we asked the question, what's the worst part about being homeless? And it was a multiple choice question. And spoiler alert, we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know what that experience was like. And overwhelmingly, the respondents to this survey, they clicked that other checkbox and they mentioned feelings of isolation, feelings of marginalization. They described feeling like the villain in their community, the way that people look down at them, the way that people avert their gaze, even when they weren't panhandling. And you can imagine what that does to somebody's psyche, what it does to their motivation, to their hope, to their sense of community. And they overwhelmingly describe that as the worst part about being homeless or experiencing homelessness. Because like we like to say, homelessness is not an identity. It's an experience. It's an experience that the folks here on Market Street are going through, but it doesn't define them. And so often we use verbiage like, that homeless guy doesn't want to get a job, or they're not motivated to work because they're homeless, or something like that. And it's really damaging, not only to that individual person, but to kind of in the fight against homelessness. And so we take that with us in our model, in our philosophies, and in the work that we do every single day. So going to Downtown Streets team, back in 2005 in Palo Alto, there was a newly formed business improvement district. You see these all over the country now. They're called downtown associations, more commonly. And the business owners, the constituents there, had identified basically homelessness and urban cleanliness as their two biggest issues. And so, real simple thought, what if we got the folks that are sleeping in our storefronts, that are using the bathroom in our back alleys, what if we got those folks to start cleaning up, feel better about themselves, and what if we permanently move them out of homelessness? Really simple idea. Shockingly, it had never been done. We like to say that Downtown Streets team is building teams, our teams, with our team members that restore dignity, hope, and purpose, and provide a path to recover from homelessness. This is new, we're just testing this out, so if I can get some thumbs up or thumbs down. Okay. Thank you. We're still working on that. And what that really means is Downtown Streets team is a volunteer experience program where folks join the team. They get one of these yellow shirts. You can see on the right, we'll talk about the blue shirts next. They get one of these yellow shirts. They join a team that's going to hold them accountable, but also support them like any team does in their recovery from homelessness and the trauma of homelessness. And they'll clean up the community, and guess what? They're going to change a lot of perceptions while they're doing it. And we just had a shift, and we'll have an afternoon shift as well. And again, one more time, if you go down Market Street, hopefully you see some of our yellow shirts cleaning up the community. In return for their service in the community, they receive not only case management services and employment services, in addition to all the soft skills that the volunteer experience program brings, they also receive a basic needs stipend. One of the things I realize is that volunteering is something that isn't actually afforded to folks that are in survival mode because they're worried about their survival, right? They're worried about where they're going to store their things, how are they going to eat, how are they going to, if they have enough time to stand in that line for a bus pass and then go see their case manager. Hierarchy of needs, we try and remove that and get folks to really start focusing on goal setting instead of survival and transition them on into employment. The team centers around this team meeting that we have in every single community in every single week. We actually have two here in San Francisco because it's our largest team, so we've got a mission team that's actually meeting right about now, and a team at Civic Center that just met yesterday. This team meeting is the heart and soul of the work that we do. We invite community members, and in fact, we'll end with an invitation to all of you to join one of our team meetings if you feel so inclined. We invite funders, we invite partners, and most importantly, we invite the folks that are thinking about checking out Downtown Streets team. At these team meetings, we celebrate success stories. So for Bob over here, it might be, I got an ID, but I haven't had anything with my name on it for years. That's a huge, huge win for Bob over here. And then Amy over here might have just gotten into housing, and we celebrate that and everything in between. And it becomes this environment where people are cheering each other on, they're supporting each other, like I mentioned. Don't worry, I won't read this whole quote to you. But it's been called part church revival. We've been accused of being a little culty here and there. Part 12-step meeting. There's obviously a lot of elements of sobriety in recovering from homelessness for some folks. Hiring hall, we're trying to get folks to move on into employment, but really a celebration of the team. And some of my favorite quotes here, undefeated people. Our team members, they have these incredible stories, and what they're going against, it's truly inspiring, and this team meeting is a way to celebrate that every single week. I'm also particularly proud of the impossibly cheerful staffers. We've taken the approach that you need to be incredibly, almost crazily optimistic when dealing with the issue of homelessness that seems so insurmountable. So I mentioned the blue shirts earlier. And we have this thing called a ladder success. So you start off in a yellow shirt, but you can become a team leader into a green shirt, and then a blue shirt even, a team manager. And all of our teams, they're policing themselves. They're holding each other accountable out there without any staff present. We did that, quite frankly, because we didn't have the resources in the early days to actually go out there and supervise. And we just said, hey, you're great. Here's a green shirt. You're really inspiring other team members. And so we're just going to let you run shift today. And I wish we could say we had a whiteboard somewhere and we said, what's an empowerment model look like? But we didn't. We just started kind of living it, and it became core practice. And so we do this now in 15 communities. We have over 80 projects, completely unsupervised. The team members themselves are running the program. Last year, the League of California Cities and the California State Association of Counties gave us the designation, one of only 5 models in the state of California, as an evidence-based best practice for interventions on homelessness. And they called us a community intervention, actually. You best believe I carry this task force reporter Brown with me, just in case anybody wants to show. It does a lot of my job for me. But what was really great for us is we're the only organization to actually expand out of a single community. And prove that this can be replicated and scaled. And spoiler alert, when we talk about data, when you scale, you run into a lot of additional issues. But our impact has scaled along with it, and we're now in 15 communities, as I mentioned, here in San Francisco. And believe it or not, our team actually meets up right in the back alley, right behind the Looker HQ. And so we started knocking on their door, and want to give a big shout out to Looker for not only having us here today, but for your partnership. They've helped our team members put together resumes, they've done hygiene kits, and they've really done a great job of educating their employees on the issue of homelessness. So thank you to Looker again. The kind of summation on the model, as I mentioned, it was called a community benefit, and we obviously build a community amongst our team members, but we're also building a bridge between that community and the greater community. And so many of our partners are doing great work, and they have all these success stories, and people are getting 6 months sober, or getting into housing, or they've been 14 years off the streets, and now they're working in the industry and helping others. But most of the time, this happens behind closed doors, and none of us in this room get to see it. One of the great things about Downtown Street Team, and one of the most rewarding things, is the community interaction that we've been able to have, and the community conversation that we've been able to change. And by we, I don't mean me, I mean our team members, out there on the street, picking up, beautifying the community, and changing perceptions. So going back to, that guy doesn't want to work. Well, that guy's working really hard to improve his circumstances and change his life. And so when we can change that conversation, we can start moving the needle on things like affordable housing and NIMBYism, and even employment for folks with maybe a checkered past. So why we're here today to talk about our impact data and some of the historical things we've done. When I took over in 2009, I got a list, and it was first names. And those were the people that we got into housing so far. And that was it. It was on a Word document, unprotected Word document. I know that's, I shouldn't admit that here, but I did. And so we've made great strides, and I haven't made great strides. Justin's made great strides in getting us a little further down the road. When Justin came on, we were kind of developing more and more measuring systems to get to what you see here. Some of the more frustrating things, like I mentioned with scaling, is we're not capturing all this data in every community, and we're not capturing it the same way, and this project's capturing it this way, and this project's capturing it that way. And so we talk about like 8.5 million gallons, and I'm like, that's like 15% of our teams, right? It's not a complete picture of the work that we're able to do. 60,000 needles, one of the things we're really proud of. Back in 2016 when we launched here in San Francisco, in the first year we picked up over 15,000 needles just from Civic Center. And so we want to be able to shout this from the rooftops, right? But we also need to measure our own impact and success. And so, for example, $13.91 average hourly wage, that's great. We need to get that way up if people are going to permanently exit homelessness. One of the other things we started doing as well, and we haven't found a better way yet of tracking these numbers, because a lot of systems are involved, are asking our folks things like, are you having less interactions with the police? And if so, are they positive interactions instead of interactions like maybe you used to have where you were getting handcuffed and put in the back of the cop car? Are you insured now? Are you using the emergency room as, basically the world's most uncomfortable hotel? And so asking those types of questions and gathering this information in an anonymous and optional survey on a regular basis. We're getting better. We're not nearly there yet. One of the things I will point out, and one of the things I'm incredibly proud of, is 99% of our folks are proud to be a team member and give back in their community. So they're proud to throw on that yellow shirt and really buck those myths that so many of us hold on to. and they're proud, and they feel less marginalized, isolated, and looked down upon. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Justin.
My name is Justin Damrell. I've been with Downtown Streets team for a little over 3 years. I'm really excited to share with you all my experience working at Downtown Streets team for the last 3 years. So when I first came on, I had to do an initial assessment of the systems that they currently had, their reporting systems, and kind of interview some of the staff to figure out what their data needs were. And I quickly learned that the culture around data was a range of either casual to, what can I say? What should we call it?
I'm your boss. You remember that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Adverse, at worst. So I knew that my goal, along with building amazing systems, was to get staff on board and see the amazing things that data can do for them. A couple other issues, everything was done on paper. Now, paper brings a lot of issues with it. There's storage costs, the security of physically keeping them secure. And then at the end of every quarter, our staff had to spend hours counting by hand all of these papers. We had to report on demographic information, gender, race, ethnicity, income levels. So they had to count all this by hand. It was a waste of time, and it also introduced human error with this counting. So a lot of our reporting was maybe not so accurate. There was also no aggregate reporting, and there was no way to manage duplicates. Our team members could come on and off the team at will, so within a certain quarter, we might have team members coming on and off, filling out multiple intake packets, and there's a danger of counting those twice. And then most importantly, tracking our model, the core impact that our model does. We weren't really tracking that. So to solve some of these issues, Downtown Streets team decided to partner with BitFocus right down the street. They have a software service called Clarity Human Services. It's what we in the industry call an HMIS, Homeless Management Information System. Long acronym for basically a database that many agencies can all get into in the same instance and share information about their clients, what services they've had in the past, and what they might need. It's a whole holistic approach. DST's internal Clarity system, we aren't connected to any other agencies. We were just using it for its core purpose of managing duplicates and storing team member information. One of the exciting things about Clarity is the ability to bridge instances. Our contracts, a lot of our staff are obligated to work within the county or the city instance of Clarity. And so to prevent confusion with our staff of going between two systems that look and operate basically the same, we were hoping to create this bridge. It takes a lot of time and a lot of input from our partners, whatever city or county that we're operating in, BitFocus, and us all have to come together. And there's really no reason for them to want to do that. So that's one of our issues right now that we're working on. So Clarity did solve most of the issues, but what about the other metrics that our model does? So Chris spoke a little bit about the model. What do our team members do? We have a number of team members that go out every week, volunteer their time and effort to remove trash, cigarette butts, needles, in exchange for basic needs stipend. So that model shows 4 things that we could be tracking that we're currently not, or we currently weren't. Number of team members, volunteer hours every week, how much debris was removed, and what was the other one? Oh, how much stipends were being paid out. So that was really exciting for me because as a system designer, I got to get my hands dirty and actually start innovating and creating things. And so to do that, I used a basic lamp stack. I'm not going to get too technical in it. It's just what I knew how to do, and I knew that it could solve a lot of these issues. So I created a few systems, one of them being a stipend tracking system to track how many volunteer hours our team members are putting out there and kind of what we owe them because the amount of hours correlates with how much in basic needs that we offer to them. And then how much trash was being removed, needles, cigarette butts. A couple other systems that use the lamp stack in Palo Alto, there's a food closet that's partnered with Second Harvest Food Bank. They needed to know how many people were coming in every day to report that back at the end of the year. So really simple lamp stack for that. And then also a field outreach tool for our staff to go out into the field. Something funny about that, we're not currently using it because staff aren't comfortable going out to encampments with a $600 iPod or iPad in their hand. They felt like it was kind of a target on their back. So we're currently not using that, but maybe in the future we might have a reason to bring it back. Yeah, I'll hand it back to Chris here.
So, as you can tell, and I was joking with Justin about how terrible we are or were before he came on board. Tracking, reporting, securing data. We're lucky enough, we're an 80-plus person nonprofit to be able to hire someone like Justin. Most of our partners are not in that same position. And you'd be shocked, I imagine, for most of you who haven't worked in the nonprofit world, how outdated some of these systems are and how much paper is used to do important tracking, even to government grants. So some of the sector challenges, you may have heard of this housing first approach to ending homelessness. It's adopted throughout the country and federally funded, and it's their number one priority. Just like 20 years ago, it was transitional housing, and 20 years before that, it was shelter. This approach basically is let's go out and house the most vulnerable people on the street and use housing as a form of healthcare, and that's great. It does have some social implications about once you house those folks, what do you do with the rest of the folks, right? It also is entirely dependent on this stock of housing that we all know is not existent, certainly here in the Bay Area and beyond. And for us, as not a housing first provider, we're asked to report on all these housing first type of metrics because we get federal funding. It's a real challenge. The other thing too, I don't know the answer or the exact rate here in San Francisco, but in Santa Clara County, for example, for every person that goes into housing, we have 3 households that could be families that are exiting housing into homelessness. So we can track how many people we put into housing and say, oh, isn't that great? But if more people are coming out and we're part of that system, we need to do something better, and we need to be able to start tracking that. And that's relatively new, that data in the world of homeless services. We have these uncoordinated systems, so Justin talked about the bridge. We're trying to coordinate with these systems, and they're saying there's not much motivation for us. The other problem is they're not coordinating with each other. So I'll use the example of Palo Alto again. You have folks that are in Palo Alto, East Palo Alto, right next door. It's literally a highway that separates them. They're different counties. And so if someone walks across the bridge, which happens all the time, there's a shelter right there, they're now tracked in 2 different systems. So this whole coordinated effort is lost if these systems aren't talking to each other. And as I mentioned, there's a lack of meaningful data throughout homelessness. It's really just how many people did you house? We're not tracking as well as we could. Are we keeping folks in housing? Are the interventions we're using long-lasting and effective? And so one of the things that kind of came to us in a light bulb moment is until we're waiting on affordable housing stock, and we're doing this right now in Santa Clara County. We passed a Measure A. We're building almost $1 billion of affordable housing, 750 million of which is actually going towards homeless individuals. While we're waiting on this housing, what can we do? Well, we can prepare folks for housing. We can get them ready for housing, and we can start removing some of the barriers to housing and to employment and to self-sufficiency while we're waiting on this. And so barrier removal is something we decided to start tracking. It's frustrating for us because we started talking about it, and then we started hearing other murmurs about it too. And we were like, we're right at the cusp of innovation, right? And we're working with Kaiser right now, who's fascinated by this idea of tracking these barrier removals. And our case managers were getting really frustrated as rents were going up and up and up and up and up. You can imagine it's pretty hard to house someone with a Section 8 voucher in Palo Alto, California, when the voucher is $1,250 and you can't even find a room for rent for under $3,000, right? We're in San Francisco, you get it. So we started tracking all this other stuff, right? How many interviews are folks doing, right? That's a huge barrier for someone who hasn't worked in 20 years or someone who was recently incarcerated. Getting them to the point where they're actually doing an interview is huge. For housing, even an application is huge. I can't tell you the number of people I've met that once we fix their teeth, they become a new person. They start smiling more, they start feeling better, they become more motivated, they become more hopeful. And it's hard to get a job when you walk in and you're missing half your grill, right? So these little things that are super important, we started tracking, and our case managers started feeling much more fulfilled in their work. Even if that person wasn't in housing yet, you can trace the work that they've done, and quite frankly, you can point to case managers that are more effective and case managers that are ineffective. And I'm speaking a little bit of lingo. Case managers are our folks who are staff members who are working with our team members. And so Justin designed this dashboard for us where we can start actually tracking barriers removed. Everything from getting somebody's teeth fixed to getting their record expunged to the more transformational barriers of moving people into housing and people getting 90 days. Now this is from July 1st, so this fiscal year. We're about to see a bunch of barriers hit because folks are starting to hit their 90 days. 90 days is a huge benchmark for employment, not only in homeless services or low-income vocational programs, but in employment in general. So like I mentioned, we're tracking barriers now, barriers to housing, to employment. Justin has this great program called DIRT, Debris Impact Reporting Tool. We come up with cute acronyms all the time because we have a lot of boring ones. We're starting to track cigarette butts, as Justin mentioned, needles taken off our streets. And that leads us to the question, like, what's next for Downtown Streets team? We want to better track our impact in the community. That means public savings. So how much is the county saving because we're out there removing people's barriers and transitioning them out of homelessness? Policing efforts, as I mentioned, we were able to do this in Palo Alto. We found out that between 2005 and 2013, we found this out from the police department, that quality of life crimes in downtown Palo Alto went down 53%. That is huge. Now, I'm not going to take full credit for that, but our team members were an extra set of eyes on the street. We were working with a lot of folks that had a lot of interaction with police that, like I'd mentioned before, had experienced the criminalization of homelessness, but were now on a path outside of it. And quite frankly, when they were wearing that shirt, they were heroes in the community, and the police took notice. And then that true self-sufficiency. So are people getting off government systems like SSI, SSDI, food stamps, these types of programs? Are they moving beyond, and are they staying employed with that income long-term and in housing long-term? These are obviously important things if we're going to move the needle on homelessness.
Yes, so a couple lessons that we learned. Again, going back to that data bridge that we're trying to create, we went in that kind of blind because we weren't understanding the motivations of our partners. There was no motivation for that bridge to happen, so we have to create it. We're going to kind of reword it and say, hey, we're going to be a case study on how to create this bridge. Let's all get together and do this, right? Another issue is case managers and our employment specialists, our staff. They're not really data people, they're people. They're in the trenches with our team members, removing barriers and helping them out of crisis mode. So they don't really have much time for paperwork and data entry. So we have to make sure that there's less pain points and really easy forms and things for them to fill out. And then we also have to get them on board, show them that data is cool.
Yeah. The last thing we'll mention is the work that we do was recognized as an evidence-based best practice. We've known of a couple other communities that have tried to do something similar to Downtown Streets team. They've failed. So what we're doing is unique. We can't conform to housing first just because that's what the feds are paying for. And so how do we tell our unique story? This is a conversation we're constantly having. And quite frankly, I don't think it's going to end anytime soon, if ever. And so it's an important story as you evolve to get folks like Justin on board and to constantly evaluate not only the effectiveness of your program, but how you're telling your story. And that's ultimately what data can do, right? In the last couple seconds I have, there's our contact information, and Justin and I will be around. We've got business cards, the whole nine. I constantly get the question, what's the number one thing I can do? I can't give, or I can't volunteer. If you can give or volunteer, talk to me, definitely. But if you can't do that, the number one thing you can do is to remove that sense of marginalization and isolation on the street. You can say hi to the people experiencing homelessness. Even if you don't want to give to a panhandler, you can look them in the eyes and acknowledge your shared humanity. And that goes a long way, especially if all of us jump on board and stop walking by people like they're not people. So we say here, just say hi, and if you want to check it out, we have a video about us coming into San Francisco and just saying hi to the people on the street. And that's one thing you can take away, if nothing else, about how you can help us in the fight against homelessness. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good job, buddy. Whoop.
Oh.